One. Hello, folks. Another episode of Burning Platform, and it's a real pleasure and an honor to have Bob Evans. Bob and I go a long ways. He's been a long-time enterprise software technology observer, and today we're going to talk about. And today is known for cloud wars. Well, today we're going to talk about a war of words and a war of valuations that's broken out. You've got Satya and Marc Benioff going after each other. Bill McDermott has jumped in, and Bob, you can talk about all the stuff they've been saying about each other. And then we have a war of valuations too, right? The Magnificent Seven, NVIDIA, and the hyperscalers, and so on. Almost 10x the valuations of SAP and Salesforce and so on. So there's a lot of egos at play. So, Bob, first of all, introduce yourself and then provide some context because you've been writing quite a bit about it over the last couple of months. So,
Well, Vinny, thank you. First of all, thanks for having me on the show, and a hearty hello to all of your audiences. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I have had the great privilege of being in or around the tech industry for a lot of decades, and just
wait, 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 I thought you were only 21.
I was, but I don't want anybody to feel bad, by me seeing too wet behind the ears. But Vinny, what a remarkable industry, right? That this has been, and it's the industry itself. But what's so remarkable to see about it is the impact it has on our lives, right? And you see, young people today, their whole lives they will be AI influenced, enhanced, touched. So those things are great. Watching some of the personalities, like for Cloud Wars, I've uh, working for myself. I couldn't cover every company, so I picked out 10. I call them the Cloud Wars top 10. I focus a lot on them. Some extraordinary leaders there. And as these companies get bigger and have more influence and impact on the entire world we live in, right? The things they say take on a certain significance, right? Because of the leadership of these companies that are impacting so much. So, Vinny, it's a pleasure to come on. I've followed your work closely. You've been a role model for me in some ways, and you just do a fabulous job. So it's an honor to be with you today.
You don't need to lie.
Okay.
Well, Bob, let's kick it off. You've written about the recent, kind of provocative stuff that Marc Benioff has said about Satya. And Satya usually is diplomatic, but he's been pretty critical. And McDermott has jumped in. And you and I were at the Workday Innovation Summit a couple of weeks ago, and Anil was diplomatic, but he clearly brought out that the industry needs to bring out more ROI and TCO when it comes to agentic AI, right?
Yeah.
So we usually these CEOs are nice to each other. I mean, one-on-one they'll be more critical, but they're nice to each other. But there's a public war of words that has broken out. So provide some context to that.
Yeah, Vinny, if I could, I'd like to skip like two chapters ahead and come back on this, right? Bill McDermott, 6 years now as CEO at ServiceNow after 10 years at SAP and before that at Siebel. It's interesting how he used the phrase, he said a week or two ago at ServiceNow's big event, he said, I we are seeing the beginning of the collapse of the software industrial complex. So that sure took me back to, television news in my teens or early teens, the military industrial complex, this fusion of companies that companies and government agencies that got together to do things that nobody outside of there seemed to be able to influence or affect, right? We were all pulled into that. And I think McDermott's point was this was the way that businesses bought and used software for decades. And before the world changed so much with cloud and particularly AI, that was the best we could offer. But there's a new reality that's possible with cloud, with AI, with some of these modern capabilities like agents. And this old way of doing things in which companies have become enmeshed, feeling like they have no way to break out of it, this software industrial complex is going to start to choke these businesses. So I think it was McDermott framing it in that sense, right? Sort of a mega view, Vinny, rather than my company does the right things and your company is doing, dumb things. And so I think if you look at it that way, it's interesting now to frame it because then you've got Satya Nadella saying, hey, agents are going to hollow out and really render applications almost meaningless. And my point was, well, hey, what if you're the CFO or CEO of a retail company that just spent $20 million on applications? Then
20,
you've got
20 million? How about 202 billion?
and just staggering numbers. Like, wait, why didn't you guys did you just find this out today? Why didn't you talk about this before? And how do I bridge my way into this new world? And then you've got Marc Benioff, and now he said that's not going to happen to applications. So, Vinny, I've had some very interesting discussions with Oracle, with SAP. Is it agents over here and apps over here? One's going to win, one's going to lose. And there's a very different um, mindset for each of those companies. Some say, no, no, they're inseparable. Others say they're quite different. And I think the industry needs to do a better job for its customers in helping to clarify this. So stop it's going to be all of one or all of the other. Because that just reeks too much of the old, military industrial, software industrial complex in which people feel like the best I can do is to get the least crappy outcome, right? And instead, it ought to be here's how we, the tech industry, are going to help you, the business leaders, figure out how to get the best out of what all of us are offering. So I think it's maybe, Vinny, and I'd love to get your thought. It's sort of this agent and AI stuff has come up so quickly. I think the technology has gotten out a little bit ahead of the messaging or the articulation of how these big, incredibly powerful tech companies articulate the value of what they can offer to customers.
Well, and Bob, you and I have covered the industry for a long, long time, right? So client server technology did not completely kill mainframe, right? Did not completely replace client server. So why would agentic anytime soon replace SaaS or even the previous generations is one way I look at it. I mean, one of my criticisms of the cloud world has been, even after NetSuite in the late 90s, we were born in the late 90s, right? It's been in development for good 20, 25 years now.
Yeah.
Only about 25%, if you look at the grid of vertical and geographical applications, cloud applications are still very Western, still very white collar, right? So they haven't got into verticals enough. They're not into a whole bunch of emerging markets and so on. So when we talk about, hey, we're going to kill a certain market, we define it very narrowly what
Yeah.
suits us, right? So the agentic world is so new and it is so, focused on customer service, or we were at Workday, HR, and contracts and so on, but back office, right? They're not covering industry applications yet, which is really where the big ROI is going to be, where robotics and all the other stuff start to come into play. So, my view is, it's a little bit of self, you know, patting ourselves in the back. We've
Mhm.
got great technology and we're going to kill something else. Usually takes a long time for any sector to die.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Vin. But I think, as the whole pace of the global economy, the entire business world has accelerated so much. I think that it's true it takes long for a sector to die, but I think more quickly than ever before they lose relevance, and then at some point, losing relevance to being, you go from there to sort of meaningless. And I think these leaders have to be a little more careful. You used the word a few minutes ago about being more circumspect about things. These forecasts of gloom and doom, I think are not productive. You can try to do it to foster your own case, but for too long, the tech industry has put too much emphasis on promoting its own case rather than the case of its customers. So I hope what we'll see here is a softening of some of these Armageddon type forecasts and predictions and a little bit more reality. Some people make the case, say, well, it's natural for Satya Nadella to say that he doesn't have a real big applications business. He wants to jump out in front with Agentic AI and have a big business there. So he's willing to sacrifice some of what he does with Dynamics 365. Yeah, okay, this is a little grade schoolish, right? And Marc Benioff can get, down in the muck with anybody. And I think it's time for them now lift this up and let's talk more about the impact it can have for their customers. I'm glad to see that Oracle has largely stayed out of that pissing contest.
I was going to say, Larry's been awfully quiet. Usually he's the one who's stirring the pot.
Yeah. Well,
And Kristen hasn't said much. Sam Altman, he has said a few things, but not against specific enterprise vendors. So it's kind of interesting that enterprise vendors are going after each other.
yeah, and Ellison on the last Oracle earnings call, he was saying, agents are going to really transform how people think about applications. Um, Oracle's position is that applications will evolve rapidly and become inseparable from agents, which, I think, Vinny, maybe there's a little bit of self-interest there, right? Because they got a big applications, but I think that's more how customers that I talk to are thinking about this. It's not like as the agents come in, the applications have to go down and one will win and one will lose. I don't think that's helpful. But ServiceNow and McDermott, right? It's interesting because they don't really do applications, but they do this other thing of workflows, which sits somewhere in between agents and apps, and he wants to work with everybody. So McDermott mirrored the Satya Nadella line separately. He said, I think apps are going to collapse, applications will become CRUD databases, and agents will be the place where all the action is. Yeah, okay, that could happen in some place. But as you said, it's a big, big landscape out there, right? And you're in a
To
plane
me, to
40,000
me,
feet up, you can see it's a big world out there. And I think they're looking too narrowly at what's going to play out here.
to me, the excitement about agents is you can closely tie it to enterprise value, right? Because you
Yeah.
can mirror agents to individual occupations and roles. And then you can say, okay, if I can have a junior person do something using an agent, or if an agent can allow me to scale rather than, like Salesforce has a couple of use cases where, um, if you can, during summer, not need to hire more people to do something, an agent can do that. Clearly, you can show ROI, very, very specific ROI around that. The challenge to me is these agents that we're defining, we're not ambitious enough.
Mhm.
We're still looking at back office, white collar occupations. Okay. Whereas from an enterprise perspective, you got to think about every occupation in the industrial world or in the healthcare world and so on, which requires very, very unique functionality. And I don't see that yet. So that is one concern of mine is yes, if you're just trying to replace enterprise apps, back office apps, maybe we'll get there, but is that really high value from a customer perspective?
Yeah. Vinny, two things with that. One, a couple of other companies that, are doing some very, very smart things. So you've talked a little bit about Workday. I thought it was interesting, and I put a couple pieces of content up today about this, that Workday is sort of the lone wolf among the big apps vendors. It's not saying, oh, I'm going to have 50 agents, I'm going to have 100 agents, I'm going to have 400, I'll have 1,000. They've said we did four late last year, we did four early this year, we got eight because customers are telling us that's enough food on our plate right now. We don't need to put 20 and end up using three or four. So Workday's point, you mentioned Anil Busri saying you got to get to that ROI and demonstrate that. And that CIO from the University of Florida who said, you want to break any chance of building trust, you go in and say, I'm going to do 20 agent projects and have only two or three of them work. He said, I'm going to do the two or three that work and I'm going to blow people away with the business outcomes. And then they're going to be saying, let's do more. And we'll all be behind it. Now, Google Cloud, Vinny, I think it's fascinating. For the last, 2, 3 years ago, they they developed an application and it was called something like call center was the heart of it. Call center optimization or call center as a service, something like that. What they've switched it around to now is customer experience suite, right? It isn't so much about the call center and automating that as it is about driving great customer experiences. So Google Cloud is getting more into the application space with those types of things, of which agents from the get-go are bound up and they're a central part of it. So I think there's this new wave of stuff coming that's going to be enormously valuable, and it's where companies like Oracle and SAP and Salesforce need to get to, tying apps with the agents. But what a wild time, and I think it's going to be a great time for customers.
Talking about the next wave of applications, I'm actually very excited by what Jensen from NVIDIA, he
Mhm.
presented a couple of weeks ago, a chart that showed agentic AI. But then he had the next wave of evolution. He called it physical AI.
Uh,
And he included robotics, he included autonomous vehicles and so on in that, right? To me, that really will open up the door to a lot more industries and countries, right? I mean, if you look at Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia this year, you've
yeah,
got a whole new region that is opening up to business.
yeah,
Enterprise vendors haven't done much over there, right? And a whole bunch of new industries are opening up as these countries make investments in the US. Then it's not going to be the old plants or the old logistics. It's going to be highly robotic plants, highly robotic farms, and so on. So I'm more excited about the next wave of agents, which are not just white collar focused, but they can also bring in the physical aspect of robotics, drones, sensors, UAVs, and so on. What Amazon's done to the warehouse, for example, right? That applied to every industry and every business process. And I'm not seeing enough thinking around that. Most of the enterprise software world tends to stay away from anything blue collar. It's like, and it's old stuff. Not anymore. There's a
yeah,
new new stuff coming. So
yeah,
that to me is exciting stuff. Now, how long will it take? Who knows? People aren't even talking about that, right?
yeah,
May take NVIDIA to become an application vendor, and we'll see it, right? So,
yeah. Vinny, I think for most of my life, I don't know exactly, but I've had this idea that all limitations are self-imposed,
yes.
right? We choose to uh, say, I can't do this, I can't do that, I'm too big, I'm not fast, whatever. We can always make excuses. Um, so I think the idea of these new possibilities, these new opportunities, yet we see things like who somebody a couple weeks ago, they were poo-pooing this whole thing about manufacturing in the United States. Said, what are we going to become a nation of cobblers? And if you choose to put that cap on your imagination, then yeah, that's what you're going to get. But I think, as you've described here, why can't every industry, every type of business, manufacturing, heavy industry, where we build stuff, make stuff, or even places where we don't now make stuff but could, to think about the possibility of doing things in a new way, right? Imagine the outcome, then build back. I think in the past we were limited by, we could only think about what the outcome might be, and then we were limited by the stuff we could build. There's no cap on that now, Vinny, right? When Jensen Huang talks about building these unimaginably powerful things here in the United States. You get Arvind Krishna from IBM. We're devoting $30 billion to building not just mainframes, but quantum computing in the United States. That's as far from being a cobbler as anybody could be. So
And even,
business leaders
even, even,
have to
even,
reset.
and even more mundane stuff. People forget we just went through COVID supply chain issues.
Mhm.
Why buy from stuff manufactured across oceans? I mean, we
Yeah,
are exposing ourselves to supply chain,
yeah,
risks. Shame on us if you don't do something about it, right? So
yeah,
to say I'll only make highly complex chips and so on is very short-sighted. Our consumers need everything from automobiles to shoes, right?
yeah.
So if we can do it in a next generation fashion using robotics and smarter workers, much more data intensive workers and so on, shame on us if we don't do it, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about this with my adult daughters. We're talking about traveling sometimes. They said that they never think about renting a hotel room. They never think about going to a hotel website. They said they have nothing against hotels. They've spent a lot of time in them over their lives, but growing up, they go first to Airbnb. That's just how they think about that. So why in some of these different industries, as you say, that it can be fairly mundane, that we just a very, very different way of approaching it, Vinny. So it's easy.
Look at Elon Musk, right? What is he manufacturing? EVs. He's manufacturing satellites. He's manufacturing a whole bunch of stuff that nobody else did. There'll be next generation products that we didn't know
Yeah.
5 years ago, right? So if you don't open our aperture a little more, somebody else will do it. So
Yeah. It's so true, Vin. And that's why you've talked a couple times in our conversation about, industry specific applications. I think those are going to pop open enormous new possibilities, right? There'll be less companies saying, how do I do what I did yesterday a little bit better? Instead, they're going to be saying, why don't I do these things that customers have been asking me or begging me to do for a while? Because somebody's going to do it, why not me? So I think there's a chance for these advances in the tech industry to trigger incredible waves of innovation and growth and opportunity in all the other industries. But to tie it back to what we first talked about, the tech leaders have to realize too, they're in a different game now, and they are directly impacting the way that business leaders are going to build their companies for the next 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. And you can't they just have to they have to weave this new reality into how they talk about things. It's not like the past where these sort of incremental market share battles for the same set fixed TAM as existed before. It's very different, and I think they need to do a better job of talking about the future.
the incentives are there, right? I mean, if you look at to me, I wrote a note last year where I said in the late 90s when I was at Gartner, we coined the term BOPS, Bond, Oracle, PeopleSoft, and SAP. And that was top of the heap in terms of Wall Street valuation.
Uh-huh.
10 years later, we were into FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, etc., right? The leadership had moved away from enterprise software. Now you got the Magnificent Seven, which are the hyperscalers, NVIDIA, Tesla, and so on. So the leadership has moved away from enterprise software even more, right? I mean, SAP's valuation is 250 billion, NVIDIA is over 3 trillion.
Hmm.
Microsoft, because of Azure, primarily because of Azure, is 3 trillion, right? They've lost the leadership. So what other incentive do you need? Wall Street is willing to reward innovative, a lot of growth, right? So I agree with you. I think our leadership is a little too narrow-minded on each other, focused on each other. So, or Larry will get there and beat up on SAP. It's like, Larry, that's not your competition anymore. It's a
Yeah.
new competition, which is very, very different, right?
Mhm.
So, or Satya beating up on Salesforce. Come on, Satya. Your competition is a different league. Don't ignore it's Salesforce, right? So that's
Yeah.
my point of view.
Yeah, Vinny, I did something a couple weeks ago, but I was looking at a term that has really popped up more on quarterly earnings call in the past couple of years. I'm sure it's been around a long time, but it's really something that they more focus on, RPO, remaining performance obligation, or backlogs. And last quarter, Oracle's growth for its remaining performance obligation was 63%. Microsoft's was terrific. I think it was 33 or 34%. But that's barely half of what Oracle's was. And Oracle's is not tiny, so they're not growing a high number off a small base. So the market is speaking to exactly what you just said, that uh, the companies that are not letting the past shackle or limit or prescribe what they do in the future are the ones that the customers are turning to most aggressively and ambitiously. Um, so I thought that, Oracle getting into cloud infrastructure and AI data centers, it's a very, very different approach here. So there's lots of room and opportunity for all these big companies to do very well, but they will not achieve their full potential if they don't start to think differently about how do I carry forward my customers with me into this future rather than, fighting over scraps of markets that are certainly mature.
Which they themselves are saying are dying.
Yes.
Uh, the other thing is unique agents and applications, right? But one of the things listening to this CIO from University of Florida was the excitement around contracts, right?
Yeah.
Contract intelligence. Workday acquired a company called AV Sort that allows you to look at contract intelligence. It's not that distinctive, but the fact that they have it, I mean, the CIO was all over it, right? He says, we signed so many contracts and we have so
Yeah.
many audits and so on, extremely useful. So we've got to get away from just coming up with the next version of call center or the next version of general ledger. You got to get into more unique application areas, uh, user areas, right? I like to say the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks about 800 occupations across different industries, right? And for each of those occupations, they have skills and um, um, abilities and so on. And you can tie every one of those abilities to some technology. So
Hmm.
if you need vision, if a human being needs vision, it's computer vision. If you need to move something, there's robotics. If
Yeah.
you need to walk a lot, it's conveyor belts, right? There's a lot of technology for every human faculty. We have to start thinking about, look, I'm going after this occupation. I can't just give them AI in a cognitive sense. I got to give them physical capabilities too.
Yeah.
And that's where the enterprise software vendors have been very cautious. I don't want to get into hardware. Like you say, they limit themselves,
Yeah.
because in the past, Wall Street didn't reward hardware. It's rewarding chips like crazy right now. So even Wall Street's moved on, but our mindset is still very stuck in, well, if Oracle does it, I'll do it. If it doesn't, then no, I'm going to focus on my core group of competitors.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, and I think about there was a 2009, somewhere around there, 2008, but Oracle announced that it was going to acquire Sun. And I was thinking, what? That's crazy. He said, the hardware business, everybody's getting out of it. What the hell is this dummy doing getting into it? But now a lot of the Sun technology is at the heart of Oracle's cloud infrastructure business and what it's doing with these data centers. And Vinny, the one thing too, I'm sort of going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but that press conference a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago at the White House. So there's Sam Altman, and the president was there, and Larry Ellison was there, and they were talking about, uh, this, what do they call it? Project Stargate. And for all the technology talk, which was relatively limited, Sam Altman gets up there and he said, I am confident that one of the things that will come out of this is we will dramatically accelerate the time to which it's going to take to get a cure for cancer. And he said, not just cancer with a small c, but every different type of cancer. And then Larry Ellison talked about map to an individual's genome. So that's the sort of stuff that I think this current set of leadership of the tech companies has to talk about more and expect, and where necessary, help. Somebody says, well, I'm not into cancer research or healthcare. I'm in the construction business. Okay, here's what that leap forward is going to mean for your business. Here's what these new capabilities are going to let you do that you couldn't do before. Here's how you're going to be able to do stuff 3 times as fast as what you used to be able to do, and help us mere mortals shake off this notion that we live in a world defined by limitations, and instead we want to live in a world defined by imagination.
I mean, I've been saying this for a while around verticals, right? People call me Vinnie Vertical because I'm harp on it too much. I'm also very big on global stuff. It's
Yeah,
shocking how, as enterprise software vendors, we tend to just focus on English-speaking countries. I mean, the emerging world has been growing much quicker than the UK or US or Australia, and these guys don't have any presence in Kenya or Nigeria or Colombia or whatever. And frankly, the hyperscalers have been building up capabilities in these countries, right? So we have been very narrowly focused in enterprise software. You're right. So, but come back to agents. When you talk to customers, what is there cynicism? Oh God, another term, or is there excitement?
I think there's a huge level of excitement about that, Vinny. No question. But whether it is from their own thinking internally or some of the conversations that the tech vendors are putting on them, right? It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Agents, it sounds great, end to end, working with data. This is great. Oh, what about governance? Oh, what about security? Oh, what about privacy? All very legitimate concerns that must be addressed. But I think we're going to go through one of these cycles where there's going to be some good, solid work done, good, solid ROI outcomes. And then I think when people finally say, you know what, these tech vendors, some of them are starting to do this stuff. These studio AI agent studios are going to take care of governance. They're going to take care of privacy and security. I can think about how do I become a shoe company that reinvented itself with agents. So I think what we're going to see over the next till the end of this year is going to be some very solid things. I think 2026 is going to be the explosive year for companies to unlock the power of agents. And Vinny, one thing, if I could add quickly on this, is I think that not the tech companies, but the businesses they sell to, the leaders have to think more and more about what do I do when I'm given this um, this great benefit, this what they used to call it, a dividend of time dividend. Suddenly, I've got people in my company that now they've got 10, 8, 10, 12 free hours that they didn't have 6 months ago. Am I thinking enough in advance? Is my HR team and my line of business leaders, is everybody saying, when that time is freed up, here's where we want you to spend that time. Here are the new opportunities to create. Here's that higher value work we always hear about, but nobody really says what is that higher value work that people are going to be freed up to do. So I think tech leaders have their agenda of things they need to do better, and business leaders have to get on top of this and out in front of what happens when we get this time dividend.
I love the term time dividends. I wrote a book 7, 8 years ago called Silicon Collar, which
Mhm.
looked at how automation had evolved. And I wrote it because there's a lot of fear in the Obama administration about. Um, there was a couple of Oxford economists who had written a book saying 40% of the U.S. labor force is going to be affected by automation. And I found a completely different, looking at 100 years of automation, I found a completely different trajectory. You know, automation typically targets what's called dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. They transform jobs. They don't eliminate jobs, right? A couple of good examples. One is ATM machines didn't kill um, cashiers. They turned
Uh-huh.
them into salespeople and customer service, right? I mean, our branches still have a plenty of employees. Um, UPC codes did not kill grocery checkout clerks. In fact, CPG companies said, oh my God, this allows me to now do mass customization and have many, many, many different SKU codes for the same category, right? So Campbell said, hey, I can have 100 different soups, right? Increase grocery sales.
Yeah.
So not every automation kills jobs, it transforms jobs. And like you say, most of them give you a time dividend. Now,
Mhm.
it behooves us as individuals, right, to take advantage of these agents and not be fearful of them and so on, right? I, in the dedication to the book, I dedicated it to my kids and I said, look at automation as R2D2 and 3CPO. Look at what that allowed Luke Skywalker to do, right? And throw in the aircraft and so on that he had. You can do so much more with automation. You become so much, so much more, there's so much productivity. So I, you know,
Vinny, can I offer an example in that area? This is probably about 15 years ago, but um, there was a group, a CIO advisory board I met with regularly, and one of the members of that CIO advisory board had moved recently from a food processing company to Harrah's Casino. And he said, been there about a year. He said, he said, please guess what is the happiest functional group of employees at Harris? And, we tossed out different suggestions or ideas. He said, it is the people whose job used to be emptying out the slot machines, coins, putting them in these big metal boxes that they moved around the casino and on dollies. And he said, very important job. He said, but that's what they did all day long. He said, now we have electronic cards that people use instead of coins. So those people that used to lug those things around now, they are out in customer service jobs, exactly like you said. But he said their, employee satisfaction is through the roof. He said they knew that the work they're doing, lugging around 300 pounds of coins all day long was important. But he said, now we get that 300 pounds worth of value and they can go out and talk to people about their experiences and make them better and help them find the restaurant. So I agree with you, Vinny, but why there is this certain slice of humanity, or maybe we all have it in our brains and some of it are able to tamp it down. Why do you always have to look at not you, why do some people have to always take the worst possible outcome and just drag that down? Why can't we see at least partly that light coming toward us, the end of the tunnel isn't a locomotive, all right? That uh,
Bob, it's not, I think it's unique to Western culture. Maybe it goes back to the Luddite, the Industrial Revolution, and the fears of automation are a lot focused on Western economies. If you go to Japan, Japan is one of those societies that is heavily automated, heavily. They use robotics everywhere. They have vending machines for anything. You can buy flowers, you can buy used panties, God knows what you can buy from a vending machine. Japanese are used to all that and accept it, right? On the other hand, they're also extremely immaculate with their hands. Everything they do is supremely distinctive, right? So they can balance the uh, human and machine, man-machine mix much better than we have.
Yeah, and that's why I think it harkens back to the great point that you made early on, right? There are global issues, and it isn't just global corporations doing the same thing everywhere, but the opportunities that exist in different countries, in different cultures, in different mindsets. It's vast. But again, Vinny, that's I think one of the things why you and I have been so fortunate, so blessed to be able to work in an industry like this
It was
for a while.
2026, huh? I would have thought a little bit more, a little gradual ramp up, but you're excited about much of this starting to show up in 26?
Yeah, because I think, Vinny, that all the pieces are there, right? The uh, burning platform, but I'm going to talk about a fire here, but more the ignition, not the destructive fire. But you've got the data that's being cleaned up in all these places to help agents work. You got the applications that have laid the foundation for this. You've got people, I think, broadly around the world, this doom and gloom about AI has largely been dispensed with. So they're ready for it culturally. And I think there's certainly the old-fashioned stuff that needs to be transformed. So I think there's going to be a lot of impressive victories with agents for the rest of this year and early next year. I think companies are going to, turn them loose. And certainly the tech vendors will be there with lots and lots of different offerings for that.
Well, so, 26. Well, I can tell you a company that is doing it today. You mentioned I've written a fiction book. There's a CEO called Barry Roman that the book revolves around.
Uh-huh.
The Silicon Valley automation firm. His definition of vertical is every one of the occupations that the BLS tracks. Okay. So it's not just a narrow, I'm going to go after
Yeah.
financial services or whatever. He looks at each of the 800 occupations and says, what can we package to allow workers in those industries? They could be firemen, they could be doctors, they could be, garbage collectors, whatever. What can we bring to them that makes their job much more, take the dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks out of each of those occupations? So Go read my book. Barry Roman is the CEO, and there's an analyst. The book is called The AI Analyst. So there's a analyst like us called Patrick Brennan that helps in the mystery. It's a mystery. Barry Roman disappears, and Patrick helps the FBI in the search for the CEO. But more importantly, it's the vision I see of every CEO saying, I'm going to go after every job. I'm going to make it much more productive. I'm going to give every one of them the time dividend, as you called it. So to me, it's here.
Yeah,
We just need the courage to go do. And like I said, it may be Jensen that'll have to do it. Maybe the enterprise software vendors are just too cautious and don't want to go there. But Jensen will do it, or somebody, or Elon will do it. Somebody else is going to do it.
I agree, Vinny. It's going to be a fantastic next couple years.
And old as we are, well, me,
Both.
I'm glad we are getting a chance to witness it.
Yes. 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 If only Vinny people 30, 40 years ago would have listened to us more.
Well, you were at Oracle when they acquired Sun, so take some credit for that. You weren't there when they acquired Cerner. They're into healthcare, so take some credit.
A
I
lot
take
of
a lot of credit for stuff that I've, you know, touched 100 miles away.
heck yeah. But Vinny, know that I think my closing thought would be that this idea, all limitations are self-imposed. If we do a better job of taking that weight off our shoulders, putting it in the closet, shutting the door to the closet, and stop thinking about a world full of limitations and instead one full of imagination and opportunity, we're going to be a lot happier and a lot better off.
And not to end it on a political note, but it's amazing what this administration is doing, the speed at which it is doing stuff, right? So it's raising the bar in terms of what is possible. And I think we're going to see a lot of acceleration, both in the buying audience and the vending audience. So
Yeah, it's spectacular. Absolutely, Vinny. Thank you so much for this chance to chat with you.
thank you, Bob. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Vinny.
That was fantastic. But take a look at it. I'll send you, I'll
Okay.
edit out the front and the fire part and so on. But say yes, and I'll run it. We were both so positive about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Other than pushing executives to be more ambitious. I thought you were the time dividend was fantastic.
Yeah, Vinny, I was thinking about that because it triggered with a couple of these several conversations with tech companies say we'll do X this that will give our customers the chance to let their employees do, and here comes the term, higher value work. Everybody said the exact same thing. I said, give me an example what that is. I said, well, I don't know. It's not up to me to decide. Okay. But they're getting over that. They're starting to do a better job at that. That's the one soapbox I have just been on relentlessly with them.
Us analysts need to not just parrot what they say. We need to push back and say,
Come on. That's the easy part. Now do the hard part too.
but I was really impressed with the workday couple of days.
Yeah.
I mean, they're doing a lot of stuff. Quietly, they're doing a lot of stuff without, it's not Anil's style to go brag like Larry does or what Mark is doing now. Um, it was good to see them talk about being the book of record for all agents, and
Yeah.
agents are going to be like an HR system, and then his
Yeah.
focus on ROI and so on. I thought was right on. We,
Yeah.
when he said, I think he said, um, we did very well during the financial slowdown in 2008 and 2009. The major reason was we didn't just go in and say, buy my cloud solution because it's cool. We could show them specific ROI. So
Yeah. 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 Vinny, thanks. This has been
thank
great.
you.
I hope good luck with the ongoing residential issues you're facing, but your optimism is going to get you through, buddy.
My wife's, I'm a worrywart.
Well, God bless Margaret and doubly for, you know, carrying
Thank
twice
you.
the
And
weight.
I'm glad you got to spend a month with your family. So
It's fantastic.
thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thanks, Vinny. Great to see you. So
Bye
long.
bye.